Is there a difference between religion and spirituality?
People often ask about the difference between religious and spiritual.
Well, for me, being religious means recognizing that your practices, your beliefs have been shaped by a tradition or a community that you belong to and with whom you identify.
One of the things people are saying when they say, I'm spiritual but not religious, is that they believe there are some deep underlying truths, some human emotions, some supernatural realities that they believe and they want to be in touch with, they want to get energy from, and that's good, but they see religion as limiting at the least, and at the most, actually see religion as negative.
Social scientists have noted in recent years that more and more Americans identify themselves as spiritual but not religious, and often, in fact, they very consciously disavow the term religious or religion and instead gravitate toward the idea of being spiritual instead. And so it begs the question of what's the difference between being religious and being spiritual.
When you're talking about being spiritual, people usually mean that they're suspicious of institutional or organized forms of religion, or that those are felt to be too restricting on how they understand their faith or their belief or their sense of the transcendent or the more or the divine or whatever it is that really animates and gives energy to their religious life. And I think that word energy is a lot of what people are trying to get at when they talk about the word spirituality.
And I think organized religion has to own up to some of its negative qualities. I mean, it is a human institution and it has had its own problems historically. On the other hand, and I think sometimes it's odd for me to sound so pro-religious given that I'm not somebody who's personally religiously active. But I think if someone is going to criticize religion for the ways in which they see it as having been oppressive or linked to wars and violence or linked to paternalism or linked to abuses of power, I think at the same time you have to put on the table the way that religion has been linked to ethics and human morality and character and justice in human affairs, that the criticisms are fair and it's reasonable to make them, but you got to be reasonable about the ways in which religion has advanced the human condition. And I would say people who are religious are also spiritual. They just see that taking more concrete forms with texts, symbols, rituals, and organizations.
I don't think there's any single answer to that question, but I think what some Americans at least are reacting against in the term religious is the idea of religion as an institutional phenomenon more than an individual one. They prefer to think of religion as something that is derived entirely from within themselves. Americans are classically known as rugged individualists, and there is a real strain of that in American religion. Americans don't like to take orders from institutions and hierarchies, and so there's a certain sense in which calling oneself spiritual rather than religious is an anti-institutional attitude. I think another reason that some Americans prefer the term spiritual is that it seems more all-encompassing than the term religion. I'm not sure this is true, but to say spirituality, to refer to spirituality, can, for a lot of people, encompass all sorts of practices that may or may not be institutionally accepted, and so we go back to that that anti-institutional strain in the use of this particular terminology.
So I say the problem, though, with being spiritual only is that it's hard to make it last. You know, I would like there to be the religious tradition or the spiritual profession of Craigidy, you know, or Craigism, or whatever it would be bottled on my last name, right? But the problem is, Craigidy or Craigism is not going to last beyond David Craig's lifetime unless it becomes institutionalized. And this is what Max Weber, an important sociologist of religion, talked about: the institutionalization of charisma. Now, I'm not sure I can claim charisma that would be institutionalized, but the basic idea is you have these new movements, there's a charismatic figure or founder, but eventually that charismatic energy and the initial community of followers who grouped around that person becomes institutionalized into a church or into some other kind of institutional structure that keeps the teachings going, that begins to think more systematically about how the practices work, what they mean, and then begins to ask sort of philosophical questions about doctrine, and you get this whole huge edifice that we know of as religion.